What's up, y'all? Hello and welcome. We have made it past lunch on day 4, and so we're back at it with another set of afternoon sessions. My name is Andrew Tom. I'm a senior data analyst at DBT Labs and your MC for this round. The title of this talk is Jumpstart DBT, How to Achieve Speed and Scale. And in a second, I'll be introducing our friendly enterprise DBT champ, Alex. But before we start, quick housekeeping. All chat, conversation, and QA will take place in the Slack channel, Coalesce Jumpstart DBT. And feel free to drop your questions at any point during the talk. And for those of you online, testing. And for those of you online, don't forget to do the same. After the session's over, our speaker will stick around both in person and in Slack to answer all your questions. And now, the pleasure of introducing our speaker. So, Alex Garbarini has the Avengers level title of Enterprise Platform Architecture in the Cisco Data Analytics Office. But like many of us, he's a data engineer at heart. He served as lead of platform engineering, a platform service owner, and cloud architect. And his personality comes down to 3 components: computer technology, hanging out with friends, and most importantly, his dog, Hannah. So, without any further ado, let me welcome Alex to the stage.
Thanks, Andrew. Well, so it is Thursday afternoon. We are all here ready to explore Bourbon Street if you've not done so already. Thank you so much for those that are attending in person. Also, for those that don't get the joke, DBT is always lowercase. I made that mistake once or twice, I'll admit, so you should feel bad if you still capitalize. 10 points to Gryffindor for the people who find the mistakes in the slides. So just like college, first day, are you in the right room? I hope you're in the right room. Today we're going to be talking about what it takes to get onboarded into DBT. Maybe you're just at the beginning, maybe you've been using DBT for a little while, or you're a technical advocate. Maybe you're here representing the C-suite. How can you roll it out to the rest of your company? Well, if you want to do that, I'm going to tell you about all the plumbing that goes inside, all of the different steps you're going to need to consider. From a point of view of Cisco's Iron Triangle, how we manage cost, quality, the time, I'm going to be putting it all into that vein. Definitely, we do lean a little technical, but if everybody here attended one YouTube session or one other class, pretty much good to go. I will stick around after. We do have a Slack channel. Please feel free to put all the nitty-gritty questions there. We'll be happy to answer. Okay, so first question out the gate is probably, can't I just use DBT Cloud? I do recommend that for this type of audience, but whether you're using core, whether you're using cloud, you're going to find that you have the same level of plumbing, orchestration, workflows that are going to go into bringing you into their DBT world. How you onboard people, how you manage the security. It's not something that just comes for free. So think of it like maybe Michelangelo. If you get a big block of marble, your statue is hidden inside. You just have to chisel away the extra bits. Same thing. With DBT, you're getting a canvas. It's up to you to paint it. What we're working to is the easy button. I'm just realizing, I hope there's nobody from Staples who's going to sue me. But from that easy button, once you click it, you're going to have a really easy time, a really, I would say, repetitive nature to getting started. Spoiler alert, these are the things we're going to be talking about, but the one thing, and this is the last preemptive slide, the one thing we're not talking about is why DBT. So you should attend another session to understand the value proposition behind DBT. There's lots of great things, but maybe if, for example, your folks don't know a lick of SQL, if they don't know a lick of SQL, they're going to have a bad time with DBT. So DBT does exactly what it says it does, but it doesn't do the other things. So just bear that in mind. We're assuming that you've done your research at this point. So let's talk about service architecture. Finally, we can get into it. So whether you have Snowflake or BigQuery, it really doesn't matter. We're presuming you have some data warehouse that DBT can plug into. I'm hoping that you've built it as a service. Users don't want to understand individual technologies. I'm coming from the Hadoop days where there was a zoo of technologies that we never had the ability to keep up with. Same thing here. We knew we were going to have to tack on a DBT service, but we didn't want people to have to know how to talk to Snowflake, how to talk to BigQuery, how to talk to a Slack channel. You don't want your developers all learning how to send a communication message. So we love microservices. We built an additional DBT service. That DBT service is going to take all of the work that DBT has to do to interact with your systems, go through the gateway, and navigate to all the other services underneath. Probably like a lot of you, we have a similar stack. We use Python. It gets put into a Docker image, deployed. We're using Control-M as our scheduler. Maybe you're using your own thing. Maybe it's Composer, or maybe it's a tool of choice. It really doesn't matter. From our point of view, whatever you have is probably going to be able to replace one of these. If you don't have Cloud Run, maybe you've got Beanstalk on AWS. It's all the exact same, just a different vocabulary word. We use Spanner, Fast API. Maybe you're still rocking Spring Boot. Maybe you have the new hotness. What is the new hotness for APIs? I don't even know. We're using Fast API. All right. Unfortunately for us, what we found out was when we were bringing in the DBT service, that was going to be our interaction point with DBT, we found out that we needed several other services to go with it. So if I take job control, let me say that I've got a job. I launched that job number 456. DBT responds with an asynchronous call saying that your trigger ID is 123. So, ma'am, ask me what the status of 123 is. It's running. Ask me one more time. It's done. Okay, so that type of asynchronous communication was not something that we were dealing with. We had Python jobs. We had maybe other service jobs. I'm talking to Dataproc. We had all of these other components, and we realized that rather than spinning up a really lightweight, thin type of job control service for DBT, we want to be scalable. We wanted to build out a complete job control service independent, and it ran on pretty much the same stack. But for those that want to understand what's going to be involved, here's a Easter egg slide. You can go see our entity relationship diagram later. The reason I included this is it's a lot of columns. It's a lot of things that you have to take into consideration. Some people use last update date. Some people use Windows. Some people use IDs. Whenever you build one of these services, please, if there's any leaders in here, give your architects the time to consider all of this. They need that 2 sprints in the beginning. Just leave them alone to go figure out what they need. Okay, so we understand that we're going to need a DBT service, probably a job control service and a password service or some kind of credential service. But what are they going to do if it's, again, the building blocks that we're building? What's the SOPs behind this? Well, let me take a really simple example that we can all get behind. Substitute BigQuery, which is this, with the DB that you're familiar with. But it starts with this long list, winding path of steps to onboard. And they can be as simple as collect requirements. But something so vague can actually have a bundle of things that go with it. So when you're collecting requirements, what does that mean? You have to know, is it a transformation application or consumption application? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to monitor it? What line of business does it go to? Are there government regulatory compliances that you have to consider? It's a lot to consider. So when you're going in at the start, don't think it's just going to be something easy and hand wave it away. These are all of those areas, again, our architects sat down and said, don't touch us for 2 weeks while we go figure out all of the nitty gritty. After somebody's finally approved it, then you're going to be able to go create your project, right? But what is that project going to get called? What VPC service barrier is it going to go into? How are you going to manage the compute versus storage? Google has a couple different paradigms. Snowflake has a couple different paradigms. We keep the compute and data separate. So we're going to talk about now the DBT process flow. These are the plumbing components you're really going to need to consider. Similarly to the BigQuery side or the Snowflake side, we had to collect our requirements. What goes into creating a DBT project? There are many things you need to consider. Not just the name, but what account is it going to sit in? Is it going to have a single tenant instance or a multi-tenant instance? All of these considerations are really your starting point. That onboard warehouse account, the second step there, is that entire prior flow. And remember when we talked about our service architecture, we don't want DBT having to have any understanding of what the data warehouse dialect is going to be. It doesn't have to know what slots are. It doesn't have to know what a warehouse is. We need to be able to collect all of those details for processing. Now, if I keep going through, actually, provision get. Some of these seem simple, but in the DBT world, it's strongly attached to get. So when you provision a get instance, you want to make sure you have the correct network and get through the DMZ. We made that mistake. You want to have branch protection controls. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The naming standard, the discoverability, the level of security that says whether it's internal, public, or private, all of those are things you need to consider from a Git perspective. The Active Directory groups, creating projects, again, creating projects, what name is it going to have? The DBT groups, it's not just your AD groups, but you'll have to do. So what kind of groups, what kind of permissions are going to attach? The environments. So for those that don't know in the DBT world, you have this concept of an environment. That environment carries with it the version of DBT. You want one of the latest major versions, at least one of the top 3 minor versions for that. You want to have a consistent name. There's going to be deploy and development, and you want to have control, an overview in this site of what environments are getting created. This is why we have the steps here detailing each and every single one. Creating sample jobs. This is a hilarious one for me because you would be amazed at the number of different jobs that your users are going to create. You want a consistent approach where everybody's going through the same CI/CD suite, where they're doing tests, where they're building in the same order, where they can deploy in the same way. So we found that we had to create these example jobs so that people, when they first log in, just already see a job, people identify to that, and they can put in what their particular application is going to need, but it's going to match that standard. All right, when we create credentials, these are not just the API credentials that your user's using to log in, but the service account credentials. So how do you rotate those every 1 week, 90 days, up to your InfoSec, but how do you manage the credentials? When it comes to, where are we, job control? Yeah, when it comes to job control, the actual jobs that you're using to launch will vary. Again, whether you're using Composer or whether you're using your own tool, it doesn't really matter, but having a consistent way so that all users can have the entry and exit points, ingress and egress points are important, so all of your upstream and downstream can talk to each other. And then finally, our user notification, I'll say the push. The sample run and push are really important. You want to make sure everything's configured correctly. Users are getting notifications in their Slack channel saying, yes, job was successful, I was able to run, what the next code scan date is going to be, all of those components. Now, I've talked to here about the big green box section, but you'll notice down below this purple section, license watcher, IDP, the policy watcher. What are all these watchers? Okay, there's nothing worse than paying for a DBT license. It's a lot of money, guys. And then once you get that license, the developer never even logs in. So if it's been 90 days and your developer hasn't even logged in, they're wasting your money. You can reassign it to somebody who's going to use it. So we established this watcher. The watcher is really just one daemon process that has different classes. Those classes could be like the license watcher or the policy watcher that's making sure everybody is following those standards that we had pre-created. Those classes have class rules, so I can introduce a new process to be watched by adding a class, defining the rules that that class has, how frequently it needs to run. Maybe there's some exceptions if my head of engineering wants to log in once every quarter, fine, I'm gonna put an exception for him. But I'm gonna make sure that we have this overarching view, sort of like the Eye of Sauron, watching over all of the different projects, making sure that it's going the way we need. There are a lot of those different watcher processes, and you'll find that, especially for your security, for your consistency, you're gonna introduce several. Awesome. So I'm going to talk now about the integration points. And I use CI/CD as an example, but if there's anybody from Spotify here, I love Spotify, they built something called Backstage. It's their platform of platforms. I'm using it as an example because it's open source, we love them. But they would not integrate DBT as a completely new thing. They would not go and build a website, build a new service, a platform of platforms, just plug it in. Likewise, I'm going to encourage everyone here, if you already have, probably very bright people, you already have things that you've made to absorb this type of pattern, use it. We did the same thing. So triangle, remember, we already have an integration point for our code. It does security code scans. It handles my site, it handles. So we asked very nicely, can you plug in for DBT? And they said, great. They said great, and it took them exactly one sprint to integrate it because the way DBT handles it is very elegant. For those that don't know, CI, well, technically, I don't even have to talk to DBT to make that happen. If I've got my code that's getting introduced and I've theoretically already run it once, I'm making sure my test pass, the data has the validation rules that it needs. I've published a pull request. That pull request has all of the commentary. It, from our point of view, is an automated bot that goes and scans the code and produces the result. For CD, for continuous deployment, well, for the DBT world, deployment means moving your code from one Git branch into another Git branch. There's no deploy. DBT deploys when it's actually time to execute. So it's free. So this entire integration was them just putting a really fancy facade over getting an approver. That approver is just coming in and saying, yes, the get SCM branch ID matches whatever you've you've asked to be deployed from one branch into another branch. Thumbs up, the content inside the Git repo is ready. I'm going to rubber stamp it. So from our point of view, when you're building your integration points, just please reuse everything that you have. You don't need to start from scratch. REST APIs. So I've been talking about REST APIs, and again, I wish if Roy Fielding was in the room, he wouldn't complain. We're not actually doing REST APIs, we're doing JSON over HTTP, which is an RPC call. We'll get past that. So building APIs. All of that process flow we talked about comes as APIs. We use fast APIs, so we get our Swagger for free. But I expanded one of them just to give you an idea. Even something so simple as branch controls becomes a point you need to integrate. So what rules do you have for putting code in from one branch into another? In DBT, it's a big green button. It's enticing to click it. I want to merge into my next branch, but you don't want that. You want certain users. Those users are generally system users. And you want certain behaviors to already be established before you allow the code to move between your branches. We built these APIs so that the systems underlying those service architecture layers can call. These APIs are not for people usually. Our administrators can call them, and usually they might because they want to make sure something is specially set for a particular application. But here, these APIs are, again, just ways that systems are talking to each other. They're not for people. And they abstract away all of the complexity that would be there otherwise for understanding how a system works. I'm going to use this example now just to show. I don't think you'll be able to see, but you'll see everything starts with BQ. I understand the source it's coming from. EXP and fin batch, so our expense batch and our fin batch. Dev stage prod, everything is very similar. This is the way I can have a developer drop into an application, see how it works, drop into the next application, and understand exactly how it works. There's a consistency, and this is true for every single layer. So if I go on to the next thing, environments, we call our environments a certain thing. We make sure that they're that version that we talked about. We make sure that the development instance is still kept up to date. You want your developers thinking about their code, their use case, not managing a DBT environment. So again, core or cloud doesn't matter. These are the things you're going to be considering. These are the things our APIs are taking care of automatically. Okay, this is one of the hardest ones, and I would encourage everybody to do this like now. You are going to have people who attended Baby's first macro session at this conference. I mean, we must have had something like that. You're going to have the core coders, the stars of your DBT world who are making brilliant code. And the very worst thing is going to be nobody knows about it. It's going to be sitting in a repo. Maybe it's you who made that code, and nobody knows about it. That's like the worst thing ever. So what we did was we added a repo managed by one team. And anybody, just like open source style, can submit a patch request, add their code, add their macro, add their unit test. As soon as it gets integrated, boom. It's available for free for everybody, because when we provision the application, we attach the service key, the pat key for that Git repo, the entry that talks about where it's located, and we add to their packages.yaml that component. So sweet. Somebody just logs in and they're like, oh, look at all these macros that are here waiting for me, and it keep updating. It's very unlikely that there's going to be a collision with the names we use, but we do recommend you come with some standard. But here's how we solve that problem. So Baby's first macro turns into the most advanced macro in the world. Everybody gets it for free. OK, when it comes to the jobs, we talked about this, but they don't need to be very complex. I would just recommend you come up with some starting standard. Everybody's going to think they're special and they're different, but you're going to have some recurring things. Run your unit test. Build a certain way. Make sure you have primary keys established. We do all of that. Again, you still can't read, but when we're creating the groups, I think this is a fairly new feature for DBT, but we attach what the permissions are that are allowed. These are the components the APIs are managing every single step. And there are a lot, so they do all the things. I'm going to leave it to you, but I just want to emphasize there is a lot you're going to need to consider from day one to consistent look and feel, to create the consistent experience. So I can just yank out a developer from here and shove them into recurring revenue, and they can work on that project seamlessly. Front end, exciting. So there is no front end. That's why it's exciting. When I say front end, I'm not talking about the DBT front end. You're going to code in the website. You're going to probably have a local ID at some point, but there's no front end that you have to build. And I would, again, put it in the perspective of platforming. If you're onboarding DBT, your users don't care how it works. They just want to use it. If you're onboarding to Tableau or Power BI, or if you're onboarding to your data warehouse, users don't care. They think in the terms of their application, and you must keep the context in that application's point of view. So for us, we built one website, one. And that one website lets users come in talking about what it is they want to do. I want to calculate that recurring revenue. That's the only level of question we ask them. We give them the boilerplate. They're going to be responsible for paying for it. We ask them, do you have any particular data requirement? Like, are you going to be using health data? Well, if they talk about they're going to be using health data, it narrows the type of platform because there's data sovereignty rules. There's government regulation, again, that we have to worry about. So we ask the questions in the form that they're going to understand. And then underneath the covers, all that happens is sort of done for them. This is why you don't want to be building front ends for each and every application, including DBT. Prototyping. We're going to enter in a little bit of code, but I promise to keep it still light. I remember the first time I contributed to open source. I got beat up a lot. You have end-of-line spaces. Your code styling doesn't match correctly. You didn't follow the pattern that the rest of the developers follow. So it's not even that the code didn't work. It's just that they wanted it a particular way. We also wanted it a particular way. The DBT styling is to use the CTE functions you'll see. Maybe you are coming in from a point of view of, I want to just have a big block of SQL. But that's hard to debug. You already have lineage now through DBT. Why don't you start using the features that the platform allows? So we had to guide and navigate users into the styling that we wanted, the format that we wanted. And that was a process where we first published the Golden Child project. What is it that they're going to be doing? What is it that they need to create? It's actually a lot simpler than you might think. You'll end up arguing for a little while. Those same architects will have their ivory tower design. Your actual coder guy is going to come in and say, no, that's never going to work. This is how we do it. And then you'll mold in the sample project. The components that you get from free online, like DBT utils, you're, of course, going to use day one. People won't know about them. There are a lot of packages, a lot of packages. Probably there are people in this room who have written to them. Those packages, they'll never find by themselves. People will Google, they will never just discover it. So we include a list. We keep the examples for like primary key here just as a big bolded center in the markdown file. But please help navigate your users to the packages that you prefer as well. OK, dry coding. So those Golden Child developers that we talked about that are adding to the shared repo, they have to code dry. So accept arguments like model name, column name, not a particular model or a particular column. As soon as you start modeling your prototyping for a very specific use case, you're going to have this rough time where the format, again, needs to change. They're going to have to change their code. It's never going to be kept in sequence. So we advocate for a very dry styling. I know you can't read the code. All it's saying is check where something is null or empty, accept model name and column name. And so anybody can use this macro. Very, very simple. And it will never have to change because it accepts such generic contents. Validate. So this is where it's like sad. I had this vision when we started. DBT uses the components called source files. Source files are just where you list the starting tables objects that you're going to use. Well, what if we just made one giant source file, basically, or one project of source files, and everybody will have them at the start. So they can just import it into their Git repo. They'll get it for free, and everybody can have the same name. So it will be literally drag and drop into the next project. Yeah, it doesn't work. We're still working on that. But you'll fail hard and fail fast is the only thing I can advocate. So for us, we're still working towards a solution for this. I would love ideas from the crowd. There are a couple. You can make a couple different DBT projects within one Uber project and then import that sub-project. But what we're finding is we're creating a lot of source files still. It's sad. Comes time to release. This is probably something that this particular community will do amazingly well. But talk, share. So when it came time for us to share what we had done, well, we built some Slack channels. And for Cisco, it's WebEx. So we have WebEx. It's a great product. We had rich and varied media, videos that were 1 minute long. Think of, again, that developer who's just getting started. They don't know how to write a macro. There's 100 pages that they could go read. Just give them like some popcorn material so that they can sit and go, oh, yeah, OK, I know what to research next. We did that. And it's a lot and a lot of short little videos. We created contacts. Same people that we asked, is DBT good, before we got started. We still talk to. The people that we are now meeting with, they still call us. So form communities. That's I would say the absolute most important thing. Everybody that's here today has access to the Slack channel. You should talk to us. It's not just me, who cares about me, but there will be a team of people who are excited to talk about DBT. In the room, you'll talk to each other. It's like the most important way to keep in touch. With that, I'll say questions and hand it back to Andrew for closing thoughts. Thank you.